After the success of our very first call for scores, I announced a second one just 2 months ago. We've received 142 string quartets from composers worldwide, and 5 finalists have been selected for this final round, which I'll be judging alongside an esteemed mystery panel of 2 composers, which I'm about to reveal very soon. The finalists' names have been redacted until judging is complete. By the end, we'll award 5 virtual one-on-one composition lessons with me, 5 one-year subscriptions to Nkoda, 1 license of NotePerformer 4 to the second prize winner, and 1 license of Dorico Pro to the first prize winner. I'm Saad Haddad, and welcome to the second edition of the Saad Haddad Prize. All right, let's meet our panel. First up is the winner of the 22 Barlow Prize, whose string quartets have been performed by the Bergamot, Tesla, and Jack Quartets. Say hello to Bobby G.
Hey, Bobby. Hello. Glad to be here.
Next up, we have one of my former Columbia University classmates, a composer who's also written for some of the top string quartets in the world, including the Argus, Flux, and Jack Quartets. She currently serves as an assistant professor of composition at the Yale School of Music. Say hello to Dr. Catherine Balch.
Hi.
All right, so let's lay out some ground rules. We'll listen to each of the 5 string quartets once from beginning to end. This will be the first time that Catherine and Bobby have seen or heard these pieces. After every listening, we will openly discuss each piece at length on the merits of their technique, creativity, and presentation. Once we have listened to and discussed every work, we will finish off with a final deliberation and announce the winning winners. At that time, I will also reveal the names of every finalist. Let's start off with our first entry, Ambrosia.
Overall, really strong. I thought that like throughout and in general, just like a very convincing and energetic kind of style. I thought that overall the string writing was really solid, and that the composer pulled like generally a pretty large sound out of the ensemble through like you know writing like double stops and careful use of double stops, open strings, harmonics, all that kind of thing. Other than that, I thought that the overall like the writing was the one thing that I always think about when it comes to like writing for string quartet or for chamber music in general is especially this kind of music that has a sort of okay, maybe I shouldn't say like aesthetic leanings like neo-romantic or whatever, but I think it's nice when there's a kind of conversational quality, as in like sort of every instrument has a kind of speaking or a conversational role, where for instance in the first movement where you have that chugging sort of taka 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 ta rhythm, it doesn't just stay like in one instrument like the viola or something the whole time. It gets passed around the ensemble in creative and interesting ways, and everyone gets to sort of take on these kinds of song-like roles at some points, and At other points, they're going back to that sort of chugging sort of motor and such. And then just throughout, I thought there was some very solid like contrapuntal writing, which is kind of rare these days. So I thought that was neat. Yeah, overall solid.
I really loved this piece. I loved listening to it. I love the trajectory from intense rhythmic energy and grid-like momentum to a more atmospheric space at the end. I thought this string writing was really, really nice. It seems like it would be a fun piece to play and a fun piece to put together. I think that, yeah, what Bobby said about sort of creating dialogue between the instruments and a sense of conversation or passing of the line was particularly effective in the second movement. I think in the last movement, I was surprised like that at the very end, the pizzicati were not passed around between the strings. I thought that would have been a nice way to sort of tie together this sense of dialogue and ecological web of sounds that the composers, I think, particularly successful at creating in the second movement. I really like the use of quarter tones. I think they add a lot of expressive intonation to the piece and work really nicely. There's some beautiful textural things. Again, in the second movement, I think that this sort of textural buildup at letter B all the way through H or so is really lovely. There's something I want to say about this sound in the third movement, this bridge body, exhale air tone. If the composer, it seems to me that the performers didn't quite get that really non-pitch determinate sound. And something I often do right when I'm asking for a non-determinately pitched sound like that is I'll often ask the players to mute the strings with harmonic pressure. I actually have a violin right here, so I could just show you. Rather, the problem with just playing the bridge is there's like a high chance of getting some pitch sound. So if players just mute the string with harmonic pressure, like any point, it doesn't matter, then it's much easier to really get the inhale, exhale. I'm not sure if Zoom is going to pick that up, but it's a much less determinately pitched sound. And I think that getting that sound right seems quite important to the whole movement, especially linking together this idea of the playing and the humming. There's something in this movement about trying to embody the string instruments, or certainly connect more closely the physical and vocal parts of the body to the playing of the strings. And so I think that one thing that would help tie that together better would be getting that particular sound right and figuring out exactly how it's intertwined with the role of the humming and playing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I thought that the second movement, that was my personal favorite. I thought that was just really lovely. Like, I mean, as Katie was saying, like the textures combining with what sort of dialogue that's passed around the ensemble is really very lovely. And some of the lines too I thought were just really surprising and beautiful. There was this sort of, I thought there was this kind of quasi-improvisatorial kind of affect to some of the lines with these very surprising rhythms and all. And it was just, I don't know, overall, I thought it was just like really, really pretty. And then I agree that I also wanted to elaborate. I agree that like I thought the third movement was, there were really cool ideas and sounds that were written in. And I guess personally I didn't feel that some of the extended techniques were always that well integrated into the sort of fabric or the nature of the final movement. On one hand, it might have just been maybe like some of the trickiness in performance, like what Katie was saying, that like if the air sounds had come through just a little bit more prominently, perhaps it would have felt different. But then this notion of like unity doesn't have to be pervasive or anything. But I think I personally wouldn't have minded if some of the sounds and if the extended techniques, especially in the third movement, had felt somewhat more woven into the like fabric itself of that particular movement. It felt like it sort of began and ended with that kind of gentle, quiet humming sounds, and then sort of the middle sections, I didn't feel that there was any kind. I personally, I would have loved like maybe a more gradual sort of transition into the more sort of standard string technique and playing and all. But
I mean, I had a thought going through my mind as I was listening to the third movement. I was thinking to myself, well, what if there wasn't a third movement? You know, what if we ended after the second movement? Because to me, the pacing was so good between first and second movement. By the time I got to the third, because it was a fast first movement, a slow second movement, a slow third movement, just globally.
I don't know if I described the second movement as slow. The second movement had a sort of textural agitation.
Yeah.
And I think, in fact, could be, and even like the way the solos would be launched would be with this arpeggio figure. And then there'd be these sort of flirtations with agitation with the octave sort of tremolandi. Mm-hmm. And so I didn't find the second movement slow. I like the idea of ending in this place where you are lost and it is deep, this sort of idea of the amber pool merits this third movement. I think, though, we all kind of felt that like not all the pieces of the third movement, not all the materials felt that they fit together in quite the same with quite the same like cohesion
Mhm.
and clarity as the other two. I kind of identify a couple things. Like the first is this getting this sense of like what is the role of the singing and the breath tones, and how is the body, the sounds you're trying to make with the string instrument that imitates the human body and the actual singing, like how do those really belong together as materials? And then there's also this big sort of build up towards a climactic point starting at rehearsal C to rehearsal E. I don't think you need that. I think the piece should just be about that thing that was the thing that started the piece, which is this idea of the breath and the humming and these harmonies and these kinds of pizzicattis that drip like little sort of droplets into this pool. Like, what would that piece be if it just did that? Didn't need to build into some climactic point of arrival like the other two movements.
Let's move on to the second piece, Sacred Object.
Yeah, it feels like a sort of medieval troubadour song that's been like time stretched, or something, or
Yeah,
like
that's why I picked it. Yeah.
yeah, some
Yeah.
early polyphony or song form monody, but time stretched, and this that brings out this sort of 2 and 3 part counterpoints and canonic structures and stuff. I thought it was really beautiful. I thought the JI tuning worked really nicely. I think I was really struck by the sort of straightforward elegance of the material, but also just I was very captivated the whole time.
Yeah, totally agreed. I kind of loved this piece actually. I think there's something that I find very bold and very brave about writing like slow, transparent music that's mostly in quarter notes and half notes and such. A good chunk of the piece is like in quarter note goes like 42 or 60 or something, which is, oh man. And then all the way that it's engaging with past material or sort of, sounds from old music and such is, I thought was really kind of brilliant in the way that it was so transparent about it. If I'm not wrong, it's basically like a straight up Cantus Firm sort of, it's like a Cantus Firmus essentially, right? And
Yeah.
that's sort of it feels like it's being it feels like it's being treated in some sort of old-fashioned, like almost like Demon Variations kind of way or something. I really enjoyed it, and I thought that also that the way that the composer handled JI tuning in like a melodic way is just super gorgeous. That's my take. I don't know. I think maybe I'm projecting a little bit where I'm always like a little scared to write slow music, so I was pretty impressed with this piece.
There was one sort of idea I had. I really love this piece, and I think like one could not change a note, and it's wonderful the way it is. If this composer were in a composition lesson with me, one question I might ask is during the sort of more rhythmically driven section at like letter H, I was wondering why only the cello gets to play this sort of rhythmic material, this 16th, this 32nd note dotted 16th gesture. And I was thinking, I wonder if the composer thought about having that da 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 rhythm sort of start to infect or populate the upper voices as the section goes on through letter I. Ba ba da ba da ba ba da ba da, you know. Was one thing I was thinking when I was listening to it is, oh, like that could be an interesting sort of way to continue this kind of momentum. But it's also possible that maybe the composer liked the idea of like really these kind of clear temporal divisions of the violins in sort of this duo and the viola at the half note level, and then the cello as that sort of galloping rhythmic figure.
I think what Bobby was saying about like the theme and variation vibe of it, like where you would have that material from the beginning to E is like one thing, right? And then E, it's like something completely different, but in the same harmonic vocabulary. And then like what Katie was saying at F, there's something different there, right? But then when you get to the end, again, it's like a coda, right? But it's again harkening from the beginning, and then we have something like a codetta type thing at J. So the question, at least in my mind, at least my thing is I'm always thinking about form. That's probably the first thing I think about when I look at a piece of music. And my question is, for whatever reason in my head, I'm wondering, could this been a more obvious, like this is this section, this is section, this section, or the other way, like what Katie was saying, like infecting other sections with material? And I wonder which way the composer prefers to go, because to me it seems like it could go either way, but it's somewhere kind of in the middle. I don't know if you guys get that sense, or if it's even important to you. That was my thought as I was getting to the end, like trying to like have all these memory moments in my head as I get to the end of a piece.
I guess in general, I don't know, maybe this is just me. I guess I like when it feels like a piece is sort of gradually unfolding and developing throughout. I guess there's something about like the sort of repeated every 4 or 5, however many bars it is. There's a section that's like repeated, and the next section is repeated, and the next section is repeated. Where I understand that it could be engaging with some classical or old school forms and such. I guess I like the idea of sort of this notion of like, I guess we're using the word like infecting or something like spreading, like an idea or a gradual sense of evolution. I think is generally something that I like and prefer, especially in slowly unfolding and unfurling pieces. I think that would have been, maybe it doesn't have to be like a a prescription by any means, but it's something that I think would be really exciting and interesting for the composer to explore as well in the future with this kind of work.
Let's move on to the third piece, Kumba Dance.
I liked the different range of sounds. I thought it was it was pretty ambitious in its range of ideas, right? Where you're starting out with this very percussive, just all these dry, scratchy, sort of pitchless kinds of sounds, and then eventually getting into some sort of almost Bartokian kinds of folk melody too, and like kind of energy, and then some more like straightforward like pentatonic-ish melodies and such. I thought all the range of ideas was neat and it was cool. And I particularly liked, and I think it was like a 273 or so when the composer sort of brings all of these ideas together, which is sort of, I don't know, in my head that was sort of what my ear was waiting for. I was excited for waiting for when all of these materials would come together. I think one of my bigger, I mean, this could just be a me thing as well, but my ear was sort of getting a little bit tired of some at the outset with some of the like 4-bar kind of symmetrical phrase structures, right? At the very start, you starts out with like 4 hits in the cello, and then you have 8 bars, right? And then you have the next idea that comes in that goes for another 8 bars, the next one goes for another 8 bars or something like that. Or and I guess that kind of symmetrical phrase structure just to me got sort of got a little bit monotonous for me to listen to. I would have been excited by some, just some hiccups, some change ups, that sort of thing to keep things feeling just a little bit more. I understand that maybe the dance or the music that this composer is paying homage to might be very rigidly structured in that kind of symmetrical way. But I guess, in the context of maybe, this can be like a whole aesthetic or a philosophical debate or something like that. But I guess when it comes to like sort of through composed notated music that's broadly speaking not participatory for the audience and such, I like to think that maybe there's ways that one can try to keep things rhythmically or engaging beyond just sort of very measured and exact or repeating sort of structures like these that are maybe a tad symmetrical. But that's my take.
I just want to say that I think I would love the composer to get the chance to hear this piece. I think there are lots of things that the MIDI does that are not going to have the same kind of impact or clarity as with a live string quartet. For example, a lot of the pizzicati that the composer writes, I wonder if they know that a lot of those pizzicati, even the ones marked fortissimo, are not going to sound fortissimo when played in that particular register at that particular tempo by certain members of the string ensemble. And similarly, even this kind of pocket that builds up, even though it seems very simple, starting in measure 13, 15, 16, 17, the tatute, that's actually really, really, really hard to do. And it's never going to have that crisp rhythmic precision that the MIDI playback has. So I just kind of wonder if the composer, I hope that they get the chance to hear this live so they can work out some of the tensions between the kind of rhythmic and dynamic energy that the MIDI rendering gives us and what I think will be a quite different sound world that the piece occupies in a live performance space.
Let's move on to our 4th piece, Rondo. I want to give every sort of piece a chance. If I think the piece has something in it, I will include it. And this is one of those pieces. When I said there is something there. It's pretty raw, but there's something there, right?
I think there's just a wonderful harmonic language here that's kind of old Showtime tune, jazzy, Gershwin-y. I wonder if the piece was written at the piano. Some of the writing seems very pianistic to me, and I would love to hear a piano version of this piece. Some of the writing seems possible, but very challenging for strings at this tempo, but not impossible. Just I do wonder how the composer wrote the piece, on what instrument. I think something that would be really important in a live performance of this piece is fluctuations in tempo. There's some of that the composer has written in, but I think this kind of music that's humorous and playful really depends upon a lot of sort of changes in speed of the sort of conveyor belt that is the grid of this piece. So I wonder if that's something the composer has in mind. I got a little I got a little bit sick of that motive. It went through the sort of kitchen sink of transpositions, and I kind of felt that I had enough before it was over.
It was like a sequence domino. It's like once you started that sequence, there was no stopping it at some point. Yeah. And a lot of it was on G sharp. It kept landing on this G sharp sonority a lot, you know, and it didn't really change range. Like it wasn't really high or really low. It was like always in this kind of like middle, like what you said, piano, treble clef, middle of the piano register. A lot of the piece was in that.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the same ideas there. One thought I had just at the very outset was like maybe it's a little silly to talk about key when it, you know, in a piece that's this, you know, where the main motive is this overtly chromatic. But even just in the very outset, right? I couldn't help but think that maybe that opening idea, or just the whole, it could have been taken up like a half step or something like that, just to make it more. Because I think this would have been easy to play on the piano.
Totally, yeah. It's the wrong
like,
key for string instruments. Yeah.
Yeah, like all the stuff with you know, all a million flats, a million sharps, that's actually really comfortable on the piano a lot of the time. But that opening, like just like the first system, for example, like that could easily take up a half step, and then you have the cello line become super easy instead of this awkward, you know, octave double stop situation. You can just use open string, and then the viola line would then be like an E minor sort of ish, which is great. You know, very easy, very playable.
I kept thinking that this piece should be for like saxophone quartet or even like clarinet quartet or something, or reed quartet or something.
I was also thinking woodwinds for sure. Woodwinds or piano. I mean, I think it'd be really fun to hear this piece played on the piano.
Yeah. One note I also had like just was about because like some of the use of like slurs actually, now I'm thinking, now that you mentioned it, Saad, actually looks sort of like tonguing or something. I actually feel like that would sound really good on, if it, I'm curious if this would sound like better détaché personally, like without all, like the opening motive or a lot of the stuff in general has this kind of chugging rhythmic quality and all. I feel like a lot of it would maybe for strings could actually sound really good détaché. At least in my head, I think I prefer that to some of the maybe over use of slurs. I don't know. That's my hot take.
I mean, there's something about when you hear a piece that you play. I mean, there's always going to be major edits afterwards, but if you don't get that first opportunity, it's really hard to figure out how to improve with the next piece.
Well, I think the sort of takeaway that we all are kind of dancing around is like that this piece is awesome, and is it for string quartet? ? You know,
even though you see double stops here and there that look like they might work, like a lot of them are not really necessary. Like if in the context of the piece, and I'm not even sure if they will be executed at that speed. I mean, I'm pretty sure most of them actually are not really executable at this speed anyway, especially the ones without open strings. All right, so let's move on to our last piece. This is going to be the Synesthesia Quartet.
Overall, cool, really good. I thought that on the whole it was, I don't know, really lovely. I thought the notation was interesting and ambitious, and the sort of variety of textures and range of emotions that was presented, at least in the first two movements, was really cool and really interesting. And it felt very ambitious and quite lovely. I also want to point out that I think it's nice when someone takes the time to take a recording and like spruce it up with reverb and all that. It's always just, or spruce it up with things like compression and reverb and all. It always just makes things sound quite a bit goofier and more exciting to listen to. Yeah, on the whole, it was, yeah. So on the whole, very very solid. I guess one of the things that stuck out to me, and I don't know if it's maybe they're just, this entry's at a slight disadvantage in that there's been so much JI and microtonal notation that we've heard in just the last few entries and such. I guess personally, this is just my take. I don't think that I could really understand like a meaningful, if there was a kind of meaningful or deliberate contrast that was being used between some of the microtonally inflected notes and just some of the, regularly chromatic notes and such, especially in the especially in the second movement. I felt, I guess that was one of my takes. I couldn't tell if it was just sort of, the composer maybe like thinking, oh man, all these different possible ideas and ingredients that I can add in, let's just throw all of it in. And I could hear the musicians sort of struggling to, or trying to get some of those tunings right and trying to get them exact and such. And I guess I felt that there could have been some more interesting or exciting ways that their, with the JI or microtonal sound world could have been deliberately contrasted with the chromatic universe that a lot of the other pieces, or a lot of the rest of it, seems to exist in. Yeah, that was just one of my initial thoughts.
That was going to be one of my comments too. If there is a piece of feedback I would give to this piece, is I want to know more about why this microtonal language and how is it integrated with the, I think, beautiful tonal and complex tonality that the composer is setting up here. I don't feel that the deviations from the tempered norm are actually adding much to this piece expressively. The opening, says luminous. I think it is luminous. I think the opening is just really gorgeous. Into these sort of little glissandi gestures, really lovely. If the composer isn't familiar with the work of Carola Buchholz, I think they would really like this composer. I really loved these two movements. I thought that they were both really beautiful and also showed a great attention to counterpoint and really nice part writing and really nice voicing. Where the piece is actually less successful for me is actually when you sort of give the hard work of creating a sense of trajectory and build to the musicians through box figures in the first movement. Starting at 61, there's sort of this motivic buildup of textures, and I would have been curious to see what would happen if the composer actually took a little more time to shape that material the same way they had the beginning of the piece or other parts of the sort of notey music in the work song, because I think they have that capacity to develop and shape trajectories and longer phrase structures really beautifully. But there, I thought with the more sort of extended sound world material, they kind of put it upon the musicians to do that work.
Yeah, for me, it was also that, but the transition into 73, and when that tune comes through. Like for me, I mean, this is an aesthetic thing too. It's like when we're presented with the tune, right, which this composer does, introduces this tune in the first violin. For me, it has to feel like it, I mean, this word is a strange word to use, but to feel earned. And I feel like at that spot, it's not there yet. I would have liked to hear it later, or even just when you introduce it. So anyway, that was just my,
I think it's like really not related to this issue of like 61 through 64 being these sort of aleatoric or indeterminate. I think that the lack of sense of inevitability of the tune is related to the sort of lack of phrasal attention to the material that precedes it. One thing I wrote is just like longer crossfade when I was listening to the piece. The rate at which it's built up and the rate at which it disappeared is a really steep ramp both times, if you want to talk about it in like audio engineering terms or whatever.
No, absolutely.
I mean, for me, like my gut is that Ambrosia and Sacred Object are as sort of a top two, and the Synesthesia is a third. I don't know what order that would be.
Yeah, no, I agree. I feel a little bad because I feel like, it's so happens that those are the three that had live recordings, but also I did find I agree. I thought those are the three that immediately came to mind for me as well.
You both agree on those three? I would say, for me, it's tough because I heard the rest, right? I heard 140 submissions. Many of them were really good. It was really hard choosing just these five. So for me to choose like the top two or even the best one. For me, it's like it's swimming. In, like a lot of besides these. Okay, well, let's say these three pieces: Ambrosia, Sacred Object, and Synesthesia, because what we're trying to do here with this contest thing is that we're trying to also show like what goes on behind the scenes, right? We're putting it out front. Like this is how we're deciding.
I mean, so then maybe it's worth talking about why the other two didn't make it in my intuitive. Again, it's like hard on a first listen. Like normally I think if we're adjudicating competitions, like, and it's not like a rapid fire round like this, we have the opportunity to sort of listen multiple times and have a back and forth and kind of revisit and reevaluate, sleep on it. But for me, I felt that the Rondo, if it were for a different instrumentation, my evaluation might have been stronger. Like my issue with that piece was that on the basis of a string quartet competition, I worry that the piece was not quite written for that instrumentation in mind for the reasons we talked about. And then I think just Kumba dance, like I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. I would just want to know more about the composer's notational intention, and also that the regularity, the sort of symmetrical phrase structure, the 4-bar phrase structure also is something that I would have loved to see a little more variety, and the sort of sense that there was some agitation or something breaking up that cycle for me, because for me it took away the rhythmic momentum.
Yeah, and there's like a level of clarity with those other three pieces that are not, they're almost there with the other two, but not as much as the three pieces that you guys mentioned as well. Yeah, Bobby.
Yeah, no, I agree. I honestly, a lot of the exact same thoughts echoed. One thing I think is also just, fun and exciting about some of the like the ones that I think I gravitated towards also have a kind of, because I think all 5 pieces, if one thing, there was one thing that was successful about them, I thought they all at least had some kind of, distinctive identity or some kind of distinctive sort of voice or
Totally.
intention that came through. And that's great. Like I think that's like the first, like the main, one of the most important things, like maybe the most important thing actually when it comes to when it comes to composing and making music or art in general.
Yeah.
I did appreciate the sort of what I felt were some bigger swings for the fences in like the first, second, and fifth entries, with some surprising and unexpected, like emotional range and such, as well as very ambitious choices made with regards to notation, in regards to how all these different ingredients are being compiled, which I'm always kind of an admiration of. I like when I probably appreciate when it feels like composers are taking big swings or making choices that are surprising, or ones that just I would never have thought to do. For me, that the sort of boldness of the first two and the last one were what hooked me in. So
the Ambrosia piece, to me, of the three, basically on pace alone, I would say, to me, wasn't as strong as the other two, because when at the end of hearing Ambrosia, I didn't get the same feeling that I got from Sacred Object or the Synesthesia piece. That was just me, and I have to also listen to my gut and listen to my emotional response too. Because for me, the Ambrosia piece, I think I mentioned this before, like when I got to the third movement, I just felt like, for me, I was like, how could this have been shorter, or could have this been done differently? And to me, that was a little bit of a like, okay, I like the first two movements so much, I wonder what could have been done with the third. So to me, that puts it down a peg. I mean, down a peg out of 140 submission. It's hard to say, right? But to me, I'm leaning towards the other two as first place, second place. I don't know which way it would be, but that's where I'm leaning. I don't know what you guys think. You don't have to agree with me. That's just my sense.
For the sake of deliberation, I feel like the third movement, though less polished than the other two of Ambrosia, there's something there that is special. And I think the composer is close to what that is. And I think it does belong, and it shows like a sort of ambition and sense of narrative arc through a 15-minute piece, which is really impressive. We also didn't get to hear the third movement of Synesthesia.
Right. And I think there was a fourth movement too. Yeah. Because I wanted to go to 50. Yeah. It's tough to deliberate fully on that Synesthesia piece as well in that sense. So we're kind of getting to the end now. We have to kind of decide what we want as second, and then what is first.
I actually really like the first two.
Okay.
I think Ambrosia. I mean, I totally hear what we're saying about the, because I agree. I thought that by the third movement, it felt like it had puttered out a little bit in terms of like formal clarity. Some of the sort of ebbs and flows, and as we were pointing out earlier, just didn't quite work as well as I think as the intention and the formal precision of the first two movements.
Right.
But just for the strength of the first two alone, I think it's already like I think would be one of my favorite entries. I thought it was like just conceptually actually really cool and interesting to start so intense and chugging and then sort of have this gradual kind of, I don't know, I guess decline or loss of loss of energy. But to me, that feels sort of counterintuitive, right? It's like I normally think of sort of building out or something like that as the sort of default kind of form that people think about. So I thought that was really cool. I think for me, like my favorite entry actually was Sacred Object. I thought that was awesome. I really loved just also what felt like the totally non sequitorial ending. I thought that was kind of brilliant and kind of hilarious. Yeah. So that one was my favorite one. And Ambrosia was my second, but that's just me.
I think that we were all really struck by the sort of idiosyncrasy of Sacred Object. Something about it that was both very beautiful and also very quirky. And I think that identity was really striking. On the other hand, I think both Amber Poole and Synesthesia were really thinking about sort of larger narrative arcs, which I really appreciated. And I think that's really ambitious and hard to do. And there were a lot of moments of success in both of those pieces. It gets hard when the pieces are so different that it's like, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're getting at here is just for everybody watching. It's hard. It's hard to make a decision, right? So this whole thing of this is a winner, this is a loser, this is second, it all kind of doesn't matter at a certain point, right? That's what I'm hoping that people get out of this is at a certain point, it's like almost like, oh, I like this flavor of ice cream. You like that at a certain point, right? Or I'm paying attention, like me, I'm paying attention more to form, whereas maybe some other composers are paying attention aesthetic or momentary. So it's hard to make a decision, right?
Especially but we in the moment. Like I want to like sleep on it. I want to like, I don't know, see how I feel the next day, revisit that piece when I'm in a different mood after my stomach is full. I don't know. It just all feels very at this level out of 140, all 5 of these pieces. It feels so kind of, oh, is it just because I had, you know, a cup of coffee before this? I don't know, you know, it just feels so.
But this is the reality though. This is the reality in general. I mean, some contests are rushed. Some of them are not so rushed. Some of them you spend a lot of time. They're all very different. This one I like rapid fire because I want to get your gut reaction. I don't want you to sleep on it. I want to know, what does Katie think? What does Bobby think? And this instance, right?
I mean, I will admit, like for one thing, if this were like comparing like a short film to like a full length feature or something like that, and I will admit, like if I see like a really weird, quirky, strange, out there short film versus like a perfectly constructed, like, you know, beautiful hero's journey precision kind of feature length film, even if the second feature length film was done really well, I would personally I go with the quirky weirdo short film. But that's just me. This is just my I have a thing for like weirdness. You know, to me, if something feels fresh and strange and out there, this is just my personal bias, so like it doesn't have to, you know, doesn't have to impact the both of y'all, but that's just me.
Katie, were you feeling Sacred Object and Ambrosia were in your 1-2?
Okay, for the sake of this task at hand, yes.
So we're at the end of our deliberation here. The finalists are Ambrosia by Isaac Krieger, Sacred Object by Lane Bruce, Kumba Dance by Tanashi Jera, Rondo by Albert de la Fuente, and Synesthesia String Quartet by Jeremiah Zerby. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. And drumroll praise, our second prize winner of NotePerformer 4 is Ambrosia by Isaac Krieger. And our first prize winner is Sacred Object, and he's going to be winning the Dorico Pro, not subscription, the license of Dorico Pro. Special shout out to our jury members, Bobby G and Catherine Balch. If you'd like to hear their string quartets, I've listed them down in the description below. The next contest will be announced very soon, so if you don't want to miss that announcement, make sure to hit the bell notification, as well as sign up for my email newsletter, link down below. That way you'll be sure never to miss another contest. Let's go compose and see you next time.